Okay, in the final section, then, there is this growing sense of resolution, of decision, of decisive resolution from Macbeth about not killing Duncan, because he goes through this sort of argument with himself about the reasons to not do so. And he begins here with a statement: he's here in double trust. He's here in trusting me in two different ways. He then explains: first, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. So, as I am both a relative and his subject, I am beneath him in the social hierarchy. In both of those roles, I should be strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, so not only as his relative, his subject, his an inferior, a subordinate in the hierarchy of the governance of Scotland, and then his host, the person hosting him at this particular occasion. Those three words create a lexis, I think, of what we would call sort of social order. They're all different roles for people to fulfill, and they are part of the traditional order with the king as its figurehead that obviously appeals to the divine right of kings that the play was written to kind of promote because of Shakespeare's relationship with King James. He says, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door. Now, we dealt with this syntax in the previous video, but the shifting around of the adverbial against his murderer from the end of the sentence to this middle, it should read, who should shut the door against his murderer. But again, we have the adverbial phrase, against his murderer, right in the middle of the sentence. And it is the role that he should be playing that is emphasized through this change in the word order. Nor bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels. So again, we have another lexis of innocence and purity, meek, clear, virtues, great office. Each of those words is building up this picture of Duncan as a pure and innocent and goodly ruler, someone who is led by morality and a clean conscience. And then we have this elaborate series of images that ends Macbeth's dramatic monologue. His virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. It's an extremely powerful image of the strength of his moral virtue. His virtues will plead like angels. So the good qualities of this king will plead like angels. They will have persuasive power, and they're sacred and divine. And it's a simile here, that they will plead like angels. Duncan's moral strengths are sacred and divine. They're going to have the persuasive power and the purity of angels. They are trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. They're trumpet-tongued. They are loud in their communication against the deep damnation, the deep injustice and immorality of his being murdered. So his virtues are both personified here, pleading like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, but also the simile gives his virtues a sense of what we would call being sacrosanct, being sacred. Sacrosanct is spelt this way. They're sacred. His taking off is an interesting phrase also, finally. His taking off is a euphemism. And it shows us that he can't really face the reality of Duncan's murder. It's a very evasive and vague way of defining the murder of a king, of regicide. And then he develops this with a further sort of elaborate image. And pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast. So he turns pity, again using a simile, turns pity into a naked baby, a newborn baby. So pity emphasizes the sense of innocence and ease with which the truth will be communicated. So pity is turned into a naked newborn baby through this particular simile, and is striding the blast, is floating on the air and the storm. Or it seems like heaven's cherubim. It seems like the little baby angels from heaven. So that metaphor, pity becomes like heavenly cherubim. And pity then becomes these heaven's cherubs that are blown by the invisible wind. So there's this infectious power of pity, that pity itself for Duncan's virtues is going to have this enormous persuasive power, and it's going to be communicated very clearly across the land. It's going to be like heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air. It's going to be driven by the invisible horses of the air. So this pity is going to just communicate really powerfully across the population. It will then blow the horrid deed in every eye. This incredibly powerful image of a sort of infectious communication of the feeling of pity for Duncan. And it will blow the deed in every eye. I think gives us this sense of a synesthesia. We think of the sound of the blowing of the deed, of almost like trumpets being blown, being mixed with sight here. We have almost, the tactile image of the wind, the sound of a trumpet, and then the sight of it being in every eye. Shows us, I think, the sense of Macbeth's anxiety about keeping the past secret, that it's going to be so powerful it's almost going to communicate to every sense of the population. Shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. And here, this is hyperbole and personification, that the tears of all of the people that will be upset by the injustice of Duncan's murder will be powerful enough to stop the wind. And this partly comes from an old belief that in many cases, water droplets actually stop the wind from blowing. But this image is of tears being akin to like the water dropping in a storm. And that hyperbolic is the adjectival form of hyperbole, hyperbolic personification of pity itself drowning the wind shows us that the outcry against the injustice of murdering Duncan would be enormous. He then says, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. Now, spur here are the sharp things on the back of a pair of cowboy boots that you used to jab the horse and to make it move and to make it jump. To prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which overleaps itself and falls on the other. So here, there's this powerful extended metaphor of Macbeth's motivations as being like a vaulting horse, and that the rider has a potential for disaster to follow if only ambition is the only motivation, as it leads people to overstep the mark. So let's take a look at these lines and unpack them a little more. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. So I have no spur to encourage me. I feel like I don't want to carry out this particular action. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. I can't dig the spurs into the sides of me in order to make me want to do this action because I think it's morally wrong. But then he has this final statement, but only vaulting ambition, which overleaps itself and falls on the other. So the image here is of the only thing that is driving him here to carry out this act is his vaulting ambition, which often overstretches, it overleaps itself and then falls by trying to do too much too soon. And so this powerful extended metaphor shows us that he is only motivated by ambition rather than any other sense of moral conviction, and that because of that he has a great sense of doubt about carrying out this murder. And so importantly, what we see in the transformation between the opening and the conclusion is the sense that Macbeth has reattached himself to reality, has reacquainted himself to the real series of consequences that would be likely to happen, rather than this sort of hypothetical dream world that he concocts in the opening. And so we're left at the end of this dramatic monologue with a huge sense of Macbeth's hesitancy, his moral conscience being powerfully present, and his decision not to carry out the wicked, immoral action of killing the king.